Well, thank you, Travis. This is all I expected it would be. Unfortunately, let me apologize that I won't have the kind of historical grandeur of the previous two speakers. I'm still trying to figure out what it has to do with affirmative action, which is what I want to talk about. And I want to talk about it from the perspective of what is the legal foundation of affirmative action. So in 1964, the Civil Rights Act is passed. Title VII says there will be no discrimination on the basis of race, sex, religion, other things are added later. Now notice that it did not outlaw discrimination because discrimination happens all the time. Universities discriminate when they give scholarships to talented athletes. So what the law said is that the discrimination that goes on in the world is going to go on, but it's not going to be based solely on race, sex, etc. So in the subsequent decade, particularly in university admissions, what evolved is what Hubert Humphrey swore to critics would not happen, is that it would evolve into a quota system. In fact, Hubert Humphrey said he would eat the bill if it ended up in a quota system, which is what it did. And the way the quota system worked was if you had so many slots for medical school, let's say at UC Davis, you'd say X number of spots are going to be reserved for Black Americans, Black applicants, which was forbidden by the law. So you had this inherent contradiction in affirmative action as it was working. And this led in 1978 to the Bakke decision that said, no, you can't have numerical quotas. You can't say explicitly, we're going to set aside so many slots. But then Chief Justice Powell said something that is still, through all the subsequent decisions on affirmative action, the most significant have been 2003 Grutter, and last year you had Fisher versus UT and you had the Schuett decision. Now, what they did was basically tell universities, we told you way back in '78 you can't have these kinds of overly explicit set-asides, so be more careful about how you work these programs. And it left untouched the rationale that Powell had said for discriminating. And he said there was a government interest that was served, and he said it was diversity. And as we've already said, we've got flags all over campus saying diversity. And everybody says diversity is a good thing. But you never really hear any kind of discussion about, well, what exactly is diversity? Think about all the ways that people are diverse. And there's hundreds of ways that people are diverse. Obviously, they're diverse in terms of ethnicity, they're diverse in terms of race, they're diverse in terms of economic, where they are in the 5 quintiles, as we call them, of income, regional, opinion, politics, religion. Those are just a few, and then all sorts of combinations of those, all right? Because everybody of whatever race has political opinions of religion or not a religion or whatever. So they're all, it's very, very complicated. So if you set out to say that a university, there's a compelling government interest in a university having diversity, then you say, well, what do you mean? How far does this diversity extend? How many of these various ways in which people are diverse should we take into account to create a diverse student body? So that was the first problem. The second was, it was asserted that diversity improves the educational experience of students. And that's the compelling state interest, is that it improves everybody's educational experience, to go to college with a whole diverse group of people. But there was a problem with that because you have 119 single-sex colleges and universities. That is, colleges in which either all women or all men students. And nobody says, hey, guys, you're missing out on all of this great benefits of diversity. You should have men with the women or women with the men, because that sex diversity, which we find important. Or there's 90 black colleges and universities. And nobody says, you guys are missing out too. There's all the great boons of having a diverse student body. I mean, you could have some Asians, you can have some Mexican Americans, some Puerto Ricans, you could have all sorts of other people, and then you would benefit from that diversity as well, but nobody seems to talk about that. So you begin to think critically about diversity, and you see that it really boils down to the most superficial and obvious diversity. It's the diversity of race or ethnicity. That's the one that the university is really interested in. All those other diversities, what we claim, we say we're interested in, we're not interested in them. We're not interested in your diversity of political opinion. As you can tell, right? This is not a bad ratio, 2-to-1. It's actually worse than that, right? In terms of the what I call the party line of the university, and those who deviate from the party line. We're deviationists. That's the old communist term for those who didn't follow the Marxist script. They're deviationists, right? So the university is overwhelmingly, I don't use the word liberal anymore. That's a fine, outstanding 19th century word that meant a focus on individual personal freedom, etc. I like the word progressive, something different. It's pretty overwhelmingly progressive. It's overwhelmingly secular. All right, it's overwhelmingly secular. That is, there's no concern for religious diversity. All right, whether in the faculty or in the student body. So somebody's chosen a very narrow range of diversity that counts, and all the other diversity doesn't count. So I've never heard an argument to explain, well, why is some diversity really important, so important we put flags up on the campus saying, we really like diversity, but in reality, we really like only a few elements of diversity. And then secondly, I invite anyone to find any sort of empirical research that has shown a link between educational outcomes, the quality of education, right, and how diversity concretely improves that. And if you do, then again, sit down and write the presidents of the same-sex schools and the traditional black colleges and universities and say, guys, you're missing out. All right, you're missing out. You really need this diversity because it makes the educational experience so much better. Now, usually what happens when big concepts are used that are vague or incoherent or cannot be concretely defined is that politics comes to fill the void, or institutional advantage. And if you're an administrator in any college and university in this country, all right, well, first, most likely you are looking at the next job that you want to get, all right, because you want to climb up the administrative ladder. And one thing when you apply for a job that you better be able to show and talk about is your commitment to diversity. And how do you do that? You say, well, when I came to Fresno State, black students were, I don't know the exact number, so I'm going to make one up. They were 9% of the student body. When I left, they were 12.3% of the student body. That's my commitment to diversity. Now think about that. What you do is you look at the most superficial dimension of somebody, what you can see, right? You put them into a category in which all of them fit. You say that what they are is that superficial visual dimension I can see, and everything else about them that might be interesting, everything else about them that might contribute to the institution. I don't care about that. I don't care about that. All I want is to make sure I have a critical mass of black, here's one that Hispanic, which is, by the way, Hispanic is a completely meaningless category. And I'm sorry, no, Latino doesn't help, because Latino means North and South America, so Caucasian, Chileans, and Argentinians count for diversity. You start getting into all these. So what are we talking about? Cubans, Mexicans, Puerto Ricans, Salvadorans, Guatemalans, etc. You can't get by just with this vague Latino, all right? Because the whole concept just dissolves into meaninglessness. But I will admit it's better than Hispanic, which means you speak Spanish. So that's all they care about. Now, think of the conclusion, if you think about this. The old Jim Crow regime that you heard talked about, and I'm old enough to remember it and to see it. The old Jim Crow regime said, look, if I see you and I see that you're black, I know everything there is to know about you. That's it. I already know. You may have a PhD, you may have a medical degree, you may have all sorts of talents, qualities, etc. I don't care. All I need to know about you is that you're black. And it's kind of curious that the modern universities is the same thing with some categories of students. I don't care if you're a Pentecostal, if you're a Baptist, if you're conservative, if you're anything other than, are you black? Great, I can check the box. So we have returned in a curious way back to the old Jim Crow vision of people who are defined solely by racial categories that the whole civil rights movement was fighting against. Right? And we're not interested in people as individuals. We just want to reduce them all to an easily handled category, because that's what suits the institution and its commitment to diversity. And if you think about what happens in a university, or what should happen in a university, the training of minds, of how to think, then we would think we should consider that the diversity of people's minds is the real diversity that counts in terms of a university. And the bigger diversity of points of view and minds, the better. The more fertile their interactions will be. They will rub up against each other, they will bump up against each other, you'll have these kinds of conversations. And unfortunately, most of the university today is a kind of what we used to call the amen corner in the black church, right? The same orthodoxy, the same dogma, everybody says, yay, yay, we love it, yeah, right. And when you have everybody agreeing at the same time, that's when you really need to get nervous, right? Because that's usually when bad stuff happens. So let me finish by saying, okay, what do we do about affirmative action? First, I don't care if you pass a proposition, if you change the name, whatever. Universities can admit who they want to admit. And you can have court case after court case, Supreme Court. Universities can determine who they want to let into their universities. And they can create an admission process to decide who they want to let in. And they will continue to do that. All right. So what should be done? If the law itself is clear, yet subsequent interpretations of the law have made exceptions based on a concept diversity that can't even be defined on an alleged benefit that happens to a university that nobody can demonstrate with empirical evidence, then what should it be based on? Well, I would say then we need to go back to our democratic process of creating law, Congress and the president, and we need to say, look, in 1964, when they passed this law, they didn't anticipate that it wouldn't be enough just to remove the legal barriers, that we had to do more. So let's go back to the law Let's pass bills. Let's change it to say we need to make exceptions for reparations, for what you heard eloquently talked about here, to repay that debt, to whatever you want to do, however you want to base it in the democratically legislated law, which the people vote for the representatives, rather than changing the law and then leaving it up to 9 unelected, tenured for life. Well, we are too, so that, unless we get convicted of a felony. So all that means is we plea bargain down to a misdemeanor and we can keep our tenure rights. But instead of leaving it up to them to decide, let's go back to the democratic process. Let's make this case to the people and say, this is what we should do. As it stands now, however, it is on shaky legal ground. And whether you support it, I'm frankly not interested in that dimension of it. Right? It's just, it is not well founded in law as it should be. And when that happens, what you get is the continuing conflict over issues, right? And I'll give you another example before I end of the same process, and that's abortion rights. Roe v. Wade, and even most supporters of abortion rights know Roe v. Wade was one of the worst argued Supreme Court cases ever. And because it was faulty, it has kept this issue on the boil. And even, I believe as Ruth Bader Ginsburg said, that was a big mistake, because if we had done it right, then eventually the natural evolution of people's mores and thoughts, it would have gotten to where we wanted to go. Instead, it has created this constant conflict. So as with everything that we do collectively as a people, we need to go through the political process. We need to have it grounded in what people vote for through their representatives, through both houses of Congress, all 3 branches, signed by the president. It's always going to cause trouble when it is on such a shaky legal foundation. Thank you.